In the wizarding world, most witches and wizards only ever learn the basics, but a rare few discover spells and rituals so dangerous they sit right on the edge of what magic should be allowed to do. Some of these enchantments are buried deep in the restricted section. Others were perfected by dark wizards who pushed their power far beyond anything taught at Hogwarts. Today, we're breaking down every deadly, outlawed, and otherwise forbidden spell ever shown in the series, including some so secretive that even lifelong Potterheads don't realize exist, like the Entrail Expelling Curse. The Entrail Expelling Curse is one of the oldest dark curses ever recorded, created back in a time when wizarding combat was less about strategy and more about, well, seeing what parts of the human body you could magically relocate. Medieval Europe wasn't exactly known for restraint, and this spell proves it. Its entire purpose is to force the victim's internal organs out of their body with a violent burst of magic. Modern witches and wizards sometimes joke about it, but there's nothing humorous about a spell that literally ejects your vital organs like the morning after a late-night Taco Bell binge. Especially since healers can't just pop them back in. Unlike most attack spells, which target the outside of the body, burning, slicing, stunning, this one goes straight for the internals. Historical accounts claim the organs appeared outside the victim without any visible wounds, which raises uncomfortable questions about how medieval curse crafters understood anatomy and ethics. I can't be the only one who heard that and immediately assumed the organs must exit the body out of the anus, right? Talk about pooping your guts out. Whatever technique they used, it was precise enough to bypass the skin entirely and still catastrophic enough to guarantee the outcome no one wants. The curse never appears in the main books, but it's mentioned as a genuine weapon used long before the ministry existed. Back then, curses weren't designed just to defeat an opponent. They were designed to terrify anyone who survived long enough to tell the story. Even a glancing hit with this spell caused total internal displacement, which made it popular among duelists who valued efficiency over subtlety. Today, the curse is banned, though amusingly not labeled as unforgivable. The ministry technically reserves those for spells affecting the mind, soul, or pain. Apparently, forcibly removing a person's vital organs didn't fit neatly into their filing system. Bureaucracy aside, the Entrail Expelling Curse is every bit as lethal as the Unforgivable trio, just far more graphic. Internal organs being magically launched out of the body is already horrific, but the next curse manages to keep everything inside the body while making it far deadlier. The Blood Boiling Curse. The Blood Boiling Curse is one of those dark spells that sounds exaggerated until you realize wizards genuinely invented a way to superheat a person from the inside out. Instead of producing fire or conjuring a giant microwave for you to stuff your foe into, the spell quietly raises the temperature of the victim's blood at a rapid, lethal pace. No scorch marks or smoke, just internal heat building to the point where blood vessels rupture, organs swell, and the victim collapses from catastrophic internal damage. What makes this curse especially terrifying is how subtle it is. There's nothing to see from the outside. Cooling charms won't help because the heat isn't physical. It's magical. The body feels like it's burning alive, but if you touched the victim's skin, it would be perfectly normal temperature. This disconnect is one reason the curse is notoriously difficult to counter. You have to treat magical heat with magic, and few healing spells work quickly enough once the damage starts. Dark arts texts place this curse alongside other invisible harm spells that were designed for maximum lethality with minimum evidence. Dark wizards considered these spells elegant. No mess, no blood, nothing for the aurors to clean up afterward. But the elegance comes at a cost. It requires unusually precise spellcasting. Target the wrong place, and you don't heat the blood, you just create surface burns. And dark wizards didn't enjoy partial results. This precision requirement explains why the spell never became common among Death Eaters, who preferred brutality over technique. Historically, the Blood Boiling Curse emerged during a period when dark wizards were obsessed with bypassing magical armor and protective enchantments. Since most shields protect the exterior of the body, internal targeting spells became the new frontier. The curse was perfect for that. Silent, effective, and nearly impossible to diagnose. On the upside, it gave wizard cannibals a discreet way to cook their food from the inside without alerting anyone to their ghoulish appetites. Its rarity shouldn't be confused with weakness. Among spells that target the inside of the human body, the Blood Boiling Curse is one of the most efficient, and one of the hardest to survive. If this curse turns heat into a weapon, the next one shows how dark wizards weaponized blood binding, and biology itself. Peruvian darkness enchantments. Peruvian darkness enchantments, often referred to in darker circles as killing fog, are spells designed to create total, impenetrable darkness. Unlike ordinary dimming charms or nighttime illusions, this magic produces a thick, magical blackout that absorbs light rather than simply blocking it. Lumos doesn't work. Flames don't help. Even magical light sources struggle inside it. The result is an environment where visibility drops to 0 and sound carries unpredictably. A perfect setup for anyone hoping to attack without being seen. As SpongeBob would say, this isn't your average everyday darkness. This is advanced darkness. The concept originally appears commercially through Weasley's Wildfire Whizbangs, specifically the Peruvian instant darkness powder that Draco Malfoy uses in Half-Blood Prince. While the Weasley version is sold as a prank item, dark wizards have been using similar enchantments long before Fred and George started franchising chaos. For them, this kind of magical darkness isn't a joke. It's a strategic advantage. If no one can see, no one knows where the curses are coming from. Dark versions of these enchantments can be layered with additional spells, silencing charms, confusion jinxes, concealment spells, to create environments where only the caster knows what's happening. Some dark wizards even pair killing fog with tracking charms, allowing them to navigate the blackout while their victims flail helplessly. In several old Aurora reports, dark wizards used this tactic to ambush entire groups, picking off targets one by one before vanishing into the fog. The reason these enchantments are so effective is simple. Light-based counters fail. The only reliable counter is a strong Hominum Revelio. But casting that in total darkness with curses flying around isn't exactly ideal. This type of magic is rarely discussed compared to louder spells like Avada Kedavra, but its lethality lies in its subtlety. Killing fog doesn't harm the victim directly, it simply removes their ability to defend themselves. Everything else becomes easy. When darkness itself becomes a weapon, the next entry shows what happens when the spellcaster targets the body, specifically the bones, just as creatively. The Bone-Breaking Hex. The Bone-Breaking Hex is a category of dark magic designed to fracture, pulverize, or otherwise compromise the skeletal structure of the victim. Unlike simpler jinxes that cause pain or minor injury, this hex delivers targeted, forceful impact directly to the bones. When cast properly, it can snap limbs, crack ribs, or pop joints in seconds. What makes it especially dangerous is that it leaves the skin intact, making the injury feel internal and far more disorienting. Most wizards know this type of magic indirectly thanks to the infamous Gilderoy Lockhart incident, where he attempted to mend Harry Potter's broken arm using Brachium Emendo.
Brachium Emendo!
Instead of healing the bone, Lockhart accidentally removed every bone in the arm, leaving it limp and rubber-like.
Broken? There's no bones left!
Although Lockhart wasn't using a bone-breaking hex, this event is frequently cited as an example of how disastrous bone-targeting magic can become when used incorrectly. It also proved that skeletal magic, whether healing or harming, requires precision most wizards do not possess. On the other hand, Lockhart's bone removal technique is the only proven way to turn a human into a real-life Stretch Armstrong, which, come to think of it, is extremely horrifying, and I wish I hadn't mentioned it. In its dark form, the bone-breaking hex can twist or crush them from the inside. Victims often collapse immediately, unable to support their own weight. The injury is painful, difficult to stabilize, and extremely dangerous if ribs or vertebrae are affected. In battles, dark wizards sometimes used this hex to immobilize opponents instantly before finishing them off with a more lethal spell. Healing the injuries depends on severity. Minor fractures can be treated using standard methods, but magically induced bone destruction often resists natural mending. In Harry's case, Madame Pomfrey had to regrow the entire bone structure using Skelligro, a process described as deeply unpleasant. For dark hex victims, the recovery is even tougher, since magical trauma doesn't always behave like a normal break. A final detail. Some Aurora training manuals warn that bone-targeting curses can produce fatal complications if they strike the pelvis, spine, or skull, which, given the nature of dark wizards, were usually the preferred targets. Inferius Animation Curse. The Inferius Animation Curse is one of the darkest branches of necromantic magic, used to reanimate corpses and turn them into obedient, hostile servants. An Inferius is not a ghost, not a puppet, and not a zombie in the cinematic sense. It's a dead body driven by dark magic, stripped of all personality, emotions, or memories. Like a retail worker the day after Black Friday. The curse binds the corpse to the caster's will, creating a mindless enforcer that follows orders without hesitation or fear. These creatures retain the physical strength and structure of the former bodies, but with none of the limitations of the living. They cannot feel pain, tire, or be intimidated, which makes them extremely difficult to fight without preparation. Fire is their primary weakness. It's one of the only forces that can repel or destroy them. Something Dumbledore demonstrated in the cave when he created a ring of flame that forced the Inferi back. The Inferius animation curse is particularly dangerous because it allows one dark wizard to command entire groups of corpses at once. Voldemort used this spell extensively during his rise to power, stockpiling bodies in the Inferi-infested lake beneath the Horcrux cave. The creatures remained dormant until disturbed, acting as a living, or rather unliving, alarm system. Hey, some people collect Pokemon cards, and others collect corpses. It's not weird. You're weird. Because Inferi cannot think independently, they're not strategists. They're tools. They follow commands with absolute obedience, marching, grappling, or drowning victims based on the caster's intent. This makes the spell uniquely suited for ambushes or environments where visibility is low. What makes the curse especially horrifying is its practicality. Creating an Inferius doesn't require a rare artifact or a complex ritual, just a corpse and dark enough magic. This ease of use is one reason the Ministry heavily restricts advanced necromancy, as even minor misuse can result in an army of unstoppable attackers. Inferi show what happens when dark magic weaponizes the dead. The next curse shows what happens when dark magic weaponizes the air itself. The Killing Smoke Curse. The Killing Smoke Curse, seen in the Fantastic Beasts era, is a dark spell that conjures a dense, toxic cloud capable of suffocating and dissolving its victims. Unlike standard fog or smoke effects, this curse creates a magically corrosive vapor that behaves almost like a living entity. Once released, it spreads rapidly, filling enclosed areas and reducing visibility to near zero. And you thought your uncle's cigars were bad. Victims caught in the cloud experience immediate respiratory distress. The smoke enters the lungs, cutting off oxygen and causing intense burning, both from the lack of air and from the corrosive properties of the spell. Prolonged exposure leads to the breakdown of tissue, leaving behind a residue that wizards familiar with the curse can identify instantly. In short, it's the magical equivalent of hitting a blinker while vaping. Dark wizards favored this curse as a way to immobilize or kill multiple targets at once, especially in confined spaces. The spell is difficult to disperse because it does not behave like normal smoke. Wind charms only push it temporarily, and basic air-clearing spells fail to neutralize its magical composition. The cloud persists until the caster dismisses it or its magical charge burns out, which can take several minutes, more than enough time for it to do lethal damage. The curse also has a psychological advantage. Its sudden appearance, rapid spread, and suffocating effect cause panic, breaking formations and scattering groups. This makes it useful for ambushes, escapes, or eliminating witnesses without direct confrontation. Some wizards claim it also causes a state of severe hunger, known as the munchies, but it's never been proven conclusively. Protego Diabolica. Protego Diabolica is a highly advanced dark defensive spell introduced in the Fantastic Beasts era, and it's easily one of the most terrifying variants of protective magic ever created. While ordinary shield charms simply block incoming spells, this one creates a towering ring of blue-black cursed fire that forms a barrier around the caster and the outside world, as described in the famous song Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash.
I fell into a ring of fire.
At least I assume that's what the song is about. I've never actually listened to it. The horrifying part is how Protego Diabolica decides who lives and who doesn't. The flame doesn't burn indiscriminately. It evaluates intent. Anyone the spell recognizes as an enemy is consumed instantly by the cursed fire. Anyone the spell considers an ally, or at least not a threat, can pass through unharmed. This means Protego Diabolica doesn't just defend the caster, it actively purifies the surrounding area of people it deems hostile. The flames themselves are extraordinarily destructive. They burn hotter and spread faster than regular magical fire, and they don't extinguish on contact with stone, water, or standard counterspells. The only way to survive the barrier is to not be considered an enemy in the first place, something most targets don't get the luxury of negotiating. Gellert Grindelwald demonstrated the spell during his rally in Paris, using it to separate his loyal followers from anyone who might oppose him. The moment the Aurors pursued him into the crypt, the flames expanded, creating a deadly circle that consumed several wizards instantly. Even experienced officers were caught off guard by how quickly the fire judged them and attacked. It's dark magic disguised as self-defense, and a perfect example of how far powerful wizards can twist even basic spell categories. And if cursed fire that chooses who to kill isn't unsettling enough, the next spell shows how even a simple transfiguration can become lethal when used in battle. Duro. Duro is a transfiguration spell known primarily for turning objects into solid stone. Think of it like Wizard Viagra, that affects your whole body and is not just your wand. In everyday magic, it's harmless enough, useful for reinforcing weak structures, sealing doors, or giving a statue a little more statue. But, like most spells in the wizarding world, once you introduce a dark wizard into the equation, things get dangerous, quickly. When used offensively, Duro becomes a weaponized form of instant petrification. A witch or wizard struck mid-movement can be transformed into a rigid stone figure on the spot. There's no gradual change or dramatic transformation scene. One moment the target is running, dodging, or shouting, and the next, they're a solid block of rock, frozen in whatever position they were in. Awkward when you get caught cheating on your significant other. The real danger comes immediately after the transformation. Anything that hits the petrified target, impact spells, falling debris, or even an uneven landing, can cause fractures or complete shattering. Unlike enchantment-based petrification, such as the Basilisk's Stare, Duro isn't designed for reversibility. In battle, there's usually no time to safely restore the person before the stone form collapses under pressure. During the Battle of Hogwarts, defensive transfiguration was used frequently, and spells like Duro presented a direct threat to both sides. A perfectly placed hit could immobilize an opponent instantly. A poorly timed one could turn an ally into brittle stone while curses flew overhead. It's darkly efficient. One spell to freeze, one spell to break. Transfiguration experts warn that reversing a Duro transformation is possible, but extremely delicate. Mostly because the slightest mistake during the reversal can leave parts of the victim stone and parts human, a combination no healer wants to deal with. But in certain situations, could be advantageous depending on which body part remains stone. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The deeper we go into the list, the more we see how everyday magic can be twisted into something lethal. Cruciatus Curse. The Cruciatus Curse is one of the 3 unforgivable curses, and it earns that classification immediately. When cast successfully, Crucio doesn't cut, burn, or physically harm the body. Instead, it overwhelms the nervous system with pure, unfiltered agony. Pain so intense that victims often can't scream, breathe, or remain conscious. Imagine being tied to a chair and forced to watch the Kardashians 24/7, and you'll get an idea of how terrifying this curse is. It bypasses the physical body entirely and attacks the mind directly, creating a level of suffering no medical condition could replicate. The spell requires genuine, deliberate intent to cause pain. You cannot cast this with mild irritation or half-hearted annoyance. A witch or wizard has to truly mean harm for the curse to land properly. This emotional component is why some casters, even in desperate moments, can't use the curse effectively. Harry discovered this firsthand when he tried to cast it without the necessary hatred behind it, resulting in little more than curling Bellatrix's hair for her. When Crucio is performed with full intent, the results are catastrophic. Prolonged exposure can destroy a person's sanity entirely, leaving the victim mentally shattered long after the curse has ended. This is famously illustrated by the torture of Frank and Alice Longbottom, who were left permanently incapacitated and unable to recognize their own son. Their bodies remained intact, but their minds never recovered. That distinction is what makes the curse uniquely horrifying. It doesn't need to kill to ruin someone. The spell has no known counter-curse and no quick remedy. The curse also bypasses most defensive magic. Protego can deflect it, but once it lands, there's no shielding the victim from the experience. But while this spell breaks the mind, the next one goes after something even more fundamental: free will itself. Imperius Curse. The Imperius Curse is the most deceptively dangerous of the unforgivable curses. While Avada Kedavra kills instantly, and Crucio inflicts unbearable pain, Imperio takes control of the victim from the inside, replacing their thoughts, instincts, and fears with total obedience. It's the Fox News of evil magic spells. Under its influence, a person feels calm, detached, even euphoric, as if the burden of decision-making has been lifted entirely. Unfortunately, That's because someone else is making every decision for them. Once cast, the curse allows the wizard to command the victim like a puppet, but better. They can walk, speak, steal, fight, or commit murder without hesitation, and the caster never needs to stick their hand up the victim's backside. Victims often describe feeling disconnected from their own actions, aware of what they're doing, but unable to resist. This mental separation is what makes the curse so effective. Fear and resistance are simply removed from the equation. The Imperius Curse is notoriously hard to detect. Unlike physical spells, it leaves no visible trace. During the First and Second Wizarding Wars, Death Eaters used it extensively to control ministry officials, force citizens to fight for them, and create the illusion of loyalty where none existed. Many wizards claimed to be acting under Imperius after Voldemort's fall, a claim difficult to verify because the curse doesn't leave magical residue strong enough for easy confirmation. Breaking free from Imperio is extremely rare. Only wizards with exceptional mental strength, Harry Potter included, can resist it. This resistance requires remarkable willpower, and most victims never manage to push back at all. That's why the spell is considered one of the most frightening in the wizarding world. It removes the core of what makes someone human, their autonomy. The Imperius Curse doesn't just force obedience, it can compel a victim to hurt themselves, betray loved ones, or commit acts they would never choose willingly. Sounds a lot like my ex, if I'm being honest. Next up, we have
Avada Kedavra!
Avada Kedavra, the Killing Curse. Avada Kedavra is the deadliest spell in the wizarding world, created for one job and one job only, killing the target instantly. It doesn't burn, explode, slice, poison, or even leave a mark. The victim simply drops as if someone switched their body off. That simplicity is exactly why the Ministry classifies it as an unforgivable curse. There's no safe or accidental way to use a spell that instantly ends a life. Despite that, many curse rights activists still insist that Avada Kedavra doesn't kill wizards. Wizards kill wizards. The curse works only when the caster channels enough magical power and genuinely wants the target dead. That intent requirement is why most witches and wizards can't cast it successfully. Without a focused desire to kill, the spell fizzles out, or produces nothing more intimidating than green sparks. It also drains a surprising amount of magical stamina, which is why weaker casters often fail even if they manage the intent part. One of the spell's defining traits is that nothing standard can block it. Defensive charms snap under the force of it, and there's no counter curse. The only things that have ever interfered with Avada Kedavra were extremely rare magical exceptions or physical barriers. Lily Potter's sacrifice created a powerful protective enchantment that rebounded the curse, and Priori Incantatem forced Voldemort's killing curse to collide with Harry's wand magic instead of hitting him. The curse predates the Ministry itself, likely emerging from early dark magic when wizards were still inventing new and exciting ways to reduce the population. During both Wizarding Wars, it became the Death Eater's favorite tool because it's quick, clean, and leaves behind no physical damage for Aurors to study. Voldemort used it obsessively because it matched his worldview: fear, dominance, and the fastest possible route to removing anyone who annoyed him. Plus, it's really fun to say. Avada Kedavra ends life instantly, but the next spell isn't satisfied with instant. It wants to burn, chase, and devour everything in the room. Fiendfyre. Fiendfyre is one of the most feared dark spells ever created. An enchanted fire that doesn't just burn, but grows, mutates, and chases anything that moves. Unlike ordinary fire spells, which behave like fire is supposed to, Fiendfyre feeds on magic itself. Once unleashed, it expands rapidly and begins forming shapes: serpents, dragons, chimeras, and other fiery beasts that actively hunt their targets. Yes, it's fire with a personality, and not a very pleasant one at that. There's a reason it's not called friend fire instead. Controlling Fiendfyre is almost impossible. The caster has to steer the flames constantly, adjusting their size, strength, and direction. One moment of hesitation, one slip in focus, and the fire stops taking orders. At that point, it spreads on its own and attacks indiscriminately. Friend, foe, furniture. I wouldn't trust it to reheat your dominoes either. Water won't extinguish it, freezing spells barely slow it, and most standard extinguishing charms are about as effective as politely asking it to stop. Fiendfyre's destructive power is so extreme that it can destroy a Horcrux, something almost nothing else can manage. In the Room of Requirement, a single out-of-control blast tore through mountains of stored objects, consumed cursed artifacts, and filled the entire room with a firestorm large enough to threaten the structure of Hogwarts itself. The more space Fiendfyre has to grow, the more aggressively it expands. much like my waistline. Its origins are vague, mainly because anyone experimenting with it in the early centuries probably didn't live long enough to publish a guide. Dark magic texts describe it as fire shaped by intent, which explains why the flames mimic the caster's emotions and create recognizable forms. It also explains why most sensible wizards never touch the spell. Fiendfyre devours entire rooms, but the next spell isn't about destruction on that scale. Instead, it cuts with the precision of a blade, an invisible one, born in the margins of a schoolbook. Sectumsempra. Sectumsempra is one of the most infamous dark curses in the wizarding world, created not by an ancient Dark Lord or an underground cabal, but by a teenage Severus Snape with far too much talent and far too many enemies. The spell produces deep, sudden lacerations across the victim's body, as if an invisible sword has carved straight through flesh and blood. The wounds appear instantly and bleed heavily, cutting through clothing, skin, and muscle, as if none of it offers any resistance. Big deal. Lightsabers can do all that, and they look twice as cool doing it. Snape didn't create Sectumsempra as a formal dark arts project. It was part of a private collection of spells he developed during his years of being bullied at Hogwarts. His handwritten notes hint at multiple variants, some meant for retaliation, others for protection, suggesting an entire suite of slashing curses. Only this offensive version is named in the books, but even that was enough to prove just how dangerous his experiments were. The spell is extremely lethal because it targets the body with brutal accuracy. Sectumsempra doesn't produce a single cut, it produces multiple wounds at once, striking vital areas without hesitation. The strength and severity of the damage scale with the caster's power. In the wrong hands, it's easily fatal. In the right hands, it's, well, still fatal. We see its true effect when Harry unknowingly used it on Draco Malfoy. The curse produced several severe arterial wounds within seconds. Snape only managed to save Draco because he used a counter curse and healing magic far beyond anything taught at Hogwarts. Without that intervention, Draco would have bled out faster than you can say Dobby is a free elf. One unusual detail about Sectumsempra is that its wounds don't behave like normal injuries. Standard healing methods, including Dittany, aren't enough to close them. Whatever dark magic Snape wove into the spell prevents ordinary healing, meaning only specialized counter magic can reverse the damage. If a student can create something this dangerous in a school bathroom, the next spell shows what happens when fully fledged dark wizards spend generations perfecting curses designed for war rather than self-defense. Reducto. Reducto, despite its name, is not a Marvel villain with a shrink ray, but rather a controlled blasting curse, something you use to break apart obstacles, clear debris, or impressively destroy a table in front of your Defense Against the Dark Arts classmates. But when cast at a higher power level, the spell becomes something entirely different. The high power variant can blow apart stone, metal, and magically reinforced surfaces, essentially vaporizing whatever it strikes. Naturally, anything made of flesh and bone stands absolutely no chance. At standard strength, Reducto simply forces objects to disintegrate or crack, but when fueled with enough magical force, it becomes an explosive bolt that detonates on impact. The spell doesn't create fire, but the sheer kinetic and magical force mimics an explosion, flinging debris and producing enough destructive energy to rip through solid structures. The more magic the caster pours into it, the more violent the impact becomes. We see glimpses of this destructive potential during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, when Ginny Weasley uses Reducto to reduce an entire set of magical shelves to shrapnel in seconds. The Death Eaters themselves react with genuine alarm, which says plenty. When a group of professional murderers flinch, the spell is clearly doing something right. Or they just don't watch enough horror movies. In dueling situations, the higher power variant becomes one of the most lethal spells available. It obliterates whatever it touches. Shield charms may slow the blast, but a strong enough Reducto can punch straight through them. This is why most instructors teach the moderated version. Beginners miscasting the high power bolt would result in a very quick lesson and probably be sacked from Hogwarts. Blood Pact magic. Blood pacts are among the rarest forms of magical contract in the wizarding world. A blood pact prevents two specific individuals from ever harming one another, directly or indirectly. It's magic woven out of intention, blood, and commitment. Once created, it becomes an independent, self-regulating force. And unlike a pinky promise, you can't cancel out the effect of a blood pact by simply crossing your fingers. We see the most detailed example in Fantastic Beasts, where a young Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald created a blood pact vial. This floating, sealed droplet of shared blood held a spell powerful enough to physically prevent Dumbledore from dueling or opposing Grindelwald. The magic wasn't symbolic. It was literal. Any attempt at conflict activated the Pact's protection, restraining the caster from taking harmful action. A blood pact differs from the Unspeakable Vow in one crucial way. It doesn't punish a broken promise. It blocks the violation entirely. The magic acts as an intelligent safeguard, interpreting intent and stopping harmful spells before they form. Breaking it isn't just difficult, it's nearly impossible. Even Dumbledore needed the most dangerous magical artifact in the world, the Elder Wand, to destroy the Pact Vial and undo the enchantment. The lore surrounding blood pacts suggests they predate the Ministry and may have originated in older magical cultures where agreements had to be enforced magically because written contracts meant very little. Their rarity in modern times is due to their complexity and the reality that most people don't want their life decisions bound by an object that follows them around forever, like an offensive tweet written after too many pints at the local watering hole. A magical contract that prevents betrayal sounds reassuring, until one half of the Pact grows up to become the most dangerous dark wizard of their era. Then it becomes the world's most inconvenient promise. And speaking of curses tied to blood, the Maledictus Blood Curse. A Maledictus is not a shapeshifter, nor an animagus, nor a werewolf. It's a witch or wizard born with a hereditary blood curse, passed down from mother to daughter, one that forces the individual into animal transformations that become uncontrollable over time. Eventually, the curse completes its cycle, leaving the victim permanently trapped in their animal form. Unlike lycanthropy, which spreads through infection, the Maledictus curse is locked into the bloodstream before birth. It's a fate, not an accident. Early in life, maledicti can transform voluntarily, similar to animagi, but these transformations are tinged with instability. Over the years, the curse strengthens, eroding the human side and increasing the duration and frequency of forced shifts. Nagini is the most well-known example. In Fantastic Beasts, she retains her personality, speech, and emotional responses while transforming into a snake. But as the curse progresses, the human phase shortens and the animal instincts strengthen. Eventually, the Maledictus loses the ability to turn back. The curse finishes its work, locking the individual into their final form permanently. The tragedy is that this irreversible transformation is not an episode-based cycle like the full moon. It's a path with only one ending. No potion, spell, or magical cure is known to halt or slow the process. Even the most advanced magical healers classify this curse as terminal. Because maledicti often become creatures associated with dark magic, snakes, panthers, juggalos, etc., historical records show a pattern of persecution. Many were feared, hunted, or used as weapons by dark wizards who knew their transformations could be exploited. A curse that steals your humanity piece by piece is horrifying enough, but next, we move to a magical vow that kills you the second you try to break it. Confringo. Confringo, known as the Blasting Curse's far more volatile cousin, is designed to cause whatever it strikes to erupt violently. Like my mother whenever I tried to sneak away from the dinner table without finishing all my carrots. Unlike Reducto, which primarily disintegrates or shatters objects, Confringo forces the target to explode outward, sending burning fragments and destructive magical force in every direction. It's less remove the obstacle and more turn the obstacle into a bomb. When Confringo connects, the targeted object combusts with magical fire, bright, fiery, and extremely dangerous to anyone within range. This makes it a favorite of dark wizards who enjoy causing chaos as much as damage. The spell's destructive radius is unpredictable, especially when it hits something unstable or flammable. The more magical energy behind the cast, the more catastrophic the resulting explosion. Harry uses Confringo in Deathly Hallows during the battle with Nagini in Bathilda Bagshot's home, sending blasting curses through the walls as he and Hermione try to escape. The spell tears through the structure so forcefully that fragments of the house rain down around them. It's also used against dark detectors in Half-Blood Prince, causing them to burst apart with loud, fiery blasts. Bombarda Maxima. Bombarda Maxima is the amplified form of the standard Bombarda charm. And while Bombarda is already capable of blowing holes in walls, furniture, and the occasional overly confident door, the Maxima variant takes things far further. Entire sections of stone walls, reinforced barriers, and heavy fortifications can be blasted apart in one hit, turning solid architecture into airborne rubble. The force behind Bombarda Maxima is more akin to a magical shockwave than a typical explosion. When cast, the spell releases a burst of concentrated, destructive energy that expands outward rapidly. POV me anytime I fart. Anything within the blast radius is hit with both impact and concussive force. At close range, the results are predictably lethal. Wizards caught in front of it would be struck by stone fragments, collapsing debris, or simply thrown back with enough force to break bones. Or end things outright. Hey, at least it doesn't smell bad. We see its raw power when Hermione uses it during the infiltration of Gringotts in Deathly Hallows. With one spell, she destroys a massive stone wall that would have taken normal magic dozens of spells to weaken. The fact that she uses it in a confined underground tunnel filled with priceless artifacts and dragons shows just how confident she was in its destructive potential. Incendio. Incendio is introduced as a basic fire-making spell, the kind of charm you'd use to light a fireplace or give your cauldron some extra heat. However, dark wizards, being dark wizards, couldn't resist pushing it far beyond practical levels. In its large-scale or cursed forms, Incendio becomes a sweeping arc of enchanted fire, capable of overwhelming opponents, consuming entire rooms, and burning victims alive within seconds. What is it with wizards and fire anyway? The pyromaniacs in the wizarding world have more burning spells than J.K. Rowling has money, and that's saying something. What separates amplified Incendio from normal fire-making is the magical component. These flames burn hotter, spread faster, and cling to surfaces unnaturally. Ordinary water spells may slow them, but extinguishing them completely requires far stronger magic. In battle, a powerful Incendio can engulf opponents instantly, forcing them into defensive retreat or blocking escape routes entirely. Although Incendio isn't classified as dark magic by default, certain variants unquestionably are. Some dark wizards enhance the spell to create cursed flames that resist extinguishing, spread erratically, or follow moving targets. These modified versions serve the same purpose as any other cursed fire: destruction, intimidation, and total battlefield control. We see stronger forms of fire magic throughout the series, most notably from Hagrid's wand umbrella, which suggests his broken wand core still retains significant power, and from advanced casters who use fire offensively rather than for convenience. In the wrong hands, even a simple fire spell becomes devastating. Of course, you could say the same thing about a book of matches. Large-scale Incendio is especially lethal in confined spaces, where breathable air evaporates and flames rebound off walls. Victims caught inside an enclosed area have very little time to react. This is one reason Aurors treat fire-based spells with extreme caution. They can change a duel into a death trap in seconds. Incendio may start as a harmless spark, but once amplified, it becomes a wildfire spell, one that can consume anything in its path. The Emerald Curse. The so-called Emerald Curse is the dark enchantment placed on Marvolo Gaunt's ring, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, and it remains one of the most lethal curses ever shown in the series. The moment Dumbledore touched the ring, breaking the containment protections around it, the curse shot up his hand, blackening the flesh instantly like a bad case of frostbite, and beginning a fast, unstoppable crawl toward his heart. Had Snape not intervened within minutes, Dumbledore would have died on the spot. What makes this curse so dangerous is how many layers it carries. First, it's weaponized. Horcruxes are not meant to be touched, and Voldemort specifically booby-trapped the ring to kill anyone who tried. Second, it's soul-linked. Because the ring housed a piece of Voldemort's soul, the curse carried a level of dark magic far beyond a conventional hex. It wasn't designed to harm, but execute. Hey, when it comes to protecting your property, it sure beats a guard dog. Snape's intervention merely contained it, freezing the dark magic in place. The blackened hand we see afterward is the curse held at bay, not cured. Even Snape, one of the most skilled potion masters and dark magic experts alive, could only delay the inevitable. Dumbledore himself knew the curse was terminal, describing it, essentially, as a magical death sentence. The Emerald Curse is also notable for what it reveals about Voldemort's paranoia. The ring's curse is a perfect example of his philosophy. If someone ever managed to locate one of his soul fragments, the attempt alone should kill them. In short, the Emerald Curse is a slow-motion execution disguised as an heirloom. And if dark wizards can weaponize jewelry, they certainly don't hesitate to weaponize travel. Apparition disrupting Jinxes. Apparition, the wizarding version of Star Trek's transporter technology, is one of the most efficient forms of wizard transport. However, much like a transporter, Apparition is also one of the most dangerous forms of magical travel when things go wrong. Disrupting Jinxes take advantage of this by interfering with the precise magical process that moves a witch or wizard from one location to another. These Jinxes don't slice people apart, that's fan theory territory, but they do forcibly block Apparition, trap individuals mid-movement, or cause splinching, the unpleasant condition where parts of the body fail to travel together. The Ministry uses anti-apparition enchantments extensively, especially in secure buildings like the Ministry of Magic, Azkaban, and Hogwarts. These are the defensive forms, preventing people from popping in or out without permission. However, during wartime, both Aurors and Death Eaters applied more aggressive variants. These could disrupt an apparition attempt mid-cast, leaving the target stranded, stunned, or partially splinched. In Deathly Hallows, several battles show apparition interference being used tactically. During the escape from Privet Drive, Death Eaters track and block apparition attempts, forcing Harry into a high-risk aerial chase. Later, protections around the Ministry force Harry, Ron, and Hermione to flee via the visitor's entrance instead of apparating out directly. Defensive wards and Jinxes effectively lock the trio inside, proving how restrictive and dangerous these enchantments can be. Splinching is the most notorious outcome, and while it sounds like a depraved sex act you'd find on Urban Dictionary, the actual definition isn't dirty at all, just incredibly disturbing. Even without Jinx interference, misjudged apparition can result in missing limbs, torn skin, or incomplete travel. When dark Jinxes actively manipulate the apparition process, the risk multiplies. Ron Weasley's splinching during the escape from Grimmauld Place shows how volatile mid-travel magic can be when disrupted by environmental pressure or panic. Apparition-disrupting Jinxes aren't designed to kill outright, but they can leave a witch or wizard helpless, wounded, immobilized, or stuck between locations and easy to finish off. And, in the right hands, that's exactly how dark wizards use them. Apugno. Apugno is introduced in the series as a spell that commands objects or creatures to attack a target. Hermione famously used it to send a flock of conjured birds straight at Ron during one of their less charming arguments. In its normal use, Apugno acts like a magical directive. Go there, hit that, and relies on the force of whatever is being commanded. But in darker hands, Apugno becomes exponentially more dangerous. Dark wizards can weaponize it by using creatures or enchanted objects capable of lethal damage. Instead of harmless birds or decorative teacups, they might direct sharp tools, enchanted projectiles, or even angry football fans. The spell doesn't change, only the choice of ammunition does. An ordinary spell becomes deadly simply by pairing it with the objects that can actually kill. Apugno also targets with disturbing accuracy. The spell links the caster's intent directly to the attacking entity, allowing it to hone in on vital areas, faces, throats, groins, rather than blindly swarming. This targeting ability makes Apugno far more precise than most offensive spells. Dark practitioners who favor indirect combat have used it to overwhelm enemies with swarms of magically controlled creatures, sending them into a frenzy aimed at the most vulnerable points. In close quarters, the death variant becomes even more brutal. A caster could animate glass shards, metal fragments, or sharp debris lying around a battlefield, directing them straight at critical arteries. Could you imagine such power in the real world? A simple playground disagreement would turn into a bloodbath the second one kid got mad enough to turn his Labubu collection into a deadly barrage of projectiles. The spell is rarely taught beyond standard defensive charm levels, because the potential for escalation is obvious. Even the Ministry's documentation warns that Apugno becomes increasingly unpredictable as the commanded objects grow more dangerous. The Unbreakable Vow. The Unbreakable Vow is one of the most extreme magical contracts in the wizarding world. An Unbreakable Vow waits patiently for you to make the wrong move, and then kills you instantly. The spell binds two witches or wizards in a magically enforced agreement, sealed through wand contact and verbal affirmation. Each promise is marked by a strand of flame winding around the clasped hands, binding the vow in place like a magical tripwire. The charm doesn't police intent. It doesn't care why you broke the promise. It reacts to one thing: violation. The moment the vow is broken, the caster's life force extinguishes instantly. There is no counterspell, no wiggle room, no appeal process. It's magical law. It's one of the few contracts where breaching the terms results in the highest possible penalty, administered automatically. The Ministry treats unbreakable vows cautiously, and for good reason. They aren't illegal, but they're heavily discouraged, because people tend to underestimate how literally the magic operates. In Half-Blood Prince, Narcissa Malfoy persuades Severus Snape to take an unbreakable vow, guaranteeing that he will protect Draco and complete his mission. The spell didn't just bind Snape ethically, it bound his survival to Draco's success. If Snape had refused to act at any point, the vow would have ended his life. The magic behind the vow is ancient and highly advanced, with roots in older binding traditions, where magical enforcement was considered more reliable than moral character. Once the vow is made, even highly skilled wizards like Dumbledore cannot override or cancel it. Think of it as the wizarding world's version of marriage. And next, we explore a potion so dark that even drinking it correctly might still kill you. The Cave Potion. The potion guarding Voldemort's Horcrux in the seaside cave is never officially named, but its effects are unmistakable. It is one of the most cruelly engineered magical protections in the series, designed to disable the drinker mentally, emotionally, and physically without killing them outright. I don't know about you, but that just sounds like tequila to me. The potion's apparent purpose is to drag its victim into a helpless state, while the Inferi surrounding the lake wait for the final moment. Unlike common poisons, this potion attacks the mind first. When Dumbledore drinks it, he experiences intense hallucinations, psychological torment, and overwhelming fear. The potion dredges up personal trauma, guilt, and dread, forcing the victim to relive their worst memories as their body weakens. So, yeah, tequila. Physically, the potion induces extreme weakness, paralysis, and dehydration. It prevents the victim from defending themselves and makes casting counterspells nearly impossible. Dumbledore, one of the greatest wizards alive, could barely lift his wand after consuming it. Ordinary witches or wizards wouldn't have stood a chance. Now, I know why wizards almost never drink anything stronger than butterbeer. A detail often overlooked: the potion cannot be bypassed. The basin magically refills, rejects conjured substitutes, and forces the drinker to consume every last drop. Voldemort designed it so that the guardian of the Horcrux could never escape the experience. Even summoning water afterward triggers the Inferi in the lake, ensuring the weakened victim is dragged into the depths. Taboo Curses. The taboo is one of the most quietly terrifying enchantments in the wizarding world, because it weaponizes something normally harmless: speech. A taboo is a curse that binds itself to a specific word or phrase. Remember when you were little, and no matter where you were in the house, if you accidentally said a bad word, your mom would hear it and come after you? Yeah, a taboo is a lot like that. When the specific word is spoken, the magic activates instantly, revealing the speaker's location to whoever cast the enchantment. It's not mind reading, tracking, or divination. It's a linguistic landmine. During the Second Wizarding War, Voldemort placed a taboo on his own name. Saying Voldemort didn't just summon a sense of doom. It triggered a magical detection spell that let Snatchers and Death Eaters break protective enchantments and appear directly where the speaker stood. This is why the name became dangerous again in Deathly Hallows.
And his name was...
Maybe she wrote it down.
No, I can't spell it.
The moment Harry said it at Grimmauld Place, every layer of security Dumbledore put on the house collapsed in seconds. The spell works because protective enchantments can't hide something the taboo is actively seeking. The speaker essentially lights a magical beacon that overrides wards, reveals location, and weakens barriers. Even experienced wizards like Lupin and Kingsley refused to speak the name during the war for exactly this reason. A taboo doesn't cause harm on its own, but the consequences are usually fatal. When the word activates, the target becomes traceable, vulnerable, and surrounded within moments. For rebels hiding from Voldemort's forces, speaking the forbidden word was effectively a self-issued death sentence. While taboos are rarely used in everyday magic, they require immense power and control. They demonstrate an important truth. In the wizarding world, much like the internet, even language can be weaponized. And if dark wizards can turn speech into a trap, they can certainly turn your own tongue into an enemy. Langlock. Langlock is introduced as one of the lesser-known jinxes Snape invented and left in the margins of his old potions textbook. On the surface, it seems almost childish. The spell magically adheres the victim's tongue to the roof of their mouth, rendering them unable to speak. Useful in a school fight. Embarrassing in potions class. Annoying during dinner. Harmless, right? Not in real combat. Wizarding duels rely heavily on spoken incantations. If a caster is struck with Langlock mid-duel, they instantly lose the ability to cast most offensive spells. It's magical gagging. And while being unable to talk is inconvenient at best, the real danger lies in timing. Cast Langlock at someone flying on a broom, running, or engaging multiple opponents, and the spell becomes a life-threatening liability. A silenced wizard cannot counter-curse, cannot call for help, and cannot stabilize a rapidly escalating situation. Not bad for a spell that does the same thing as a spoonful of peanut butter. The spell is especially dangerous indoors. If the victim panics, very likely when their airway partially seals, they may accidentally inhale incorrectly, or lose concentration during another spell, causing backfiring magic or spell rebounds. In wartime, a Langlock landing at the wrong moment could get someone stunned, disarmed, or killed before they could free themselves. Removing the Jinx requires counterspells or healing magic. The tongue doesn't simply unstick on its own. The Half-Blood Prince's version was strong enough that unwary students hit by it in corridors had to wait for teachers to reverse it. The Curse of the Bogies. The Curse of the Bogies is one of the classic minor jinxes in wizarding culture. Traditionally, it's nothing more than an unpleasant nuisance spell that causes the victim to suffer an aggressive, unstoppable runny nose. Students use it in duels, siblings use it on each other, and teachers tolerate it as long as no one tries to cast it during exams. However, like many harmless spells, the Curse of the Bogies can be amplified through darker magical techniques. In its weaponized form, the curse no longer produces comedic sniffles. Instead, it aggressively inflames the sinuses, swelling internal passages and producing pressure severe enough to rupture delicate nasal tissue. Wait a minute, that just sounds like regular seasonal allergies. Dark practitioners discovered that by pushing the hex beyond normal limits, they could cause bleeding, disorientation, and, in rare extreme cases, suffocation if the swelling spread to the upper airway. The danger comes from how the hex interacts with the body. Even in mild form, it targets mucous membranes. When boosted through dark magic, it overwhelms them. Aurora records from older conflict periods mention variants of the hex used specifically to incapacitate targets without leaving obvious external wounds. Victims often collapsed from dizziness, sinus pain, or sudden blood loss. It's not glamorous magic, but it's undeniably effective. This enlarged variant is very difficult to reverse. Standard counter-jinxes only treat the surface-level symptoms, leaving the deeper swelling intact. Healers typically resort to specialized diagnostic charms and targeted magical antihistamines, a far cry from the simple counter-jinx students learned. Because the spell is so easy to cast at a basic level, the Ministry closely regulates its dark variants. In the right hands, something meant to embarrass the victim becomes a silent, internal attack that can incapacitate or even kill without the dramatic flair of the more famous curses. The Werewolf Curse. In the Harry Potter canon, true lycanthropy can only be transmitted one way: a werewolf's bite while that werewolf is transformed. No spell can create an actual werewolf. Even the darkest magic can't replicate the soul-deep transformation Remus Lupin endured every full moon. However, the wider wizarding world, including the Fantastic Beasts era, does introduce curses that imitate lycanthropy's symptoms. These spells don't create genuine werewolves, but they can force the victim into a state that resembles Fenrir Greyback's attacks: heightened aggression, painful bodily distortion, and a wolf-like feral mindset. Sounds a lot like puberty.
What happened to you, ugly? No, not you.
Dark wizards used these imitation curses because they were far easier to produce than an actual bite, and didn't require waiting for a full moon. These curses typically target the victim's behavior and physical responses. Reports from the early 20th century describe individuals temporarily taking on wolfish characteristics before the spell wore off. The results were unpredictable, and often left victims disoriented or injured even after recovery. Dark practitioners favored these lycanthropy-mimicking curses for intimidation. A victim struck with one would appear to have been attacked by a werewolf, spreading fear without involving an actual transformed creature. Aurora documentation from the period notes cases where attackers cast these spells to incite panic in communities already terrified of werewolves. None of these curses produce a true werewolf's long-term condition. No monthly transformations, no vulnerability to silver, and no permanent infection. That's not to say that shooting a faux werewolf with a silver bullet won't kill them, because it definitely will. It's just that it doesn't have to be silver. Any old ammunition will do. Regardless, in the hands of someone aiming to terrorize civilians or frame a werewolf for violence, these mimicry spells were disturbingly effective. Dark magic doesn't need to be authentic lycanthropy to cause chaos. And next, we move to a curse that doesn't imitate anything. It simply explodes everything in front of it. Expulso. Expulso is one of the most violent explosive spells in the wizarding world. And while Confringo is already dangerous enough on its own, Expulso takes the concept of magical detonation to an entirely new level. When cast, the spell releases a rapid burst of blue-tinged energy that detonates the target with force powerful enough to shatter metal, obliterate stone, and send debris flying in every direction. Expulso is a lot like a grenade launcher, only better because you can bring it on a plane without the TSA throwing a fit. We see its destructive power clearly in Deathly Hallows, when Antonin Dolohov uses Expulso to attack the cafe where Harry, Ron and Hermione take refuge. The spell erupts with such force that it hurls shrapnel across the room. Harry barely manages to deflect the worst of the blast, underlining how fast and deadly Expulso is when cast by an experienced dark wizard. Petrificus Totalus. Petrificus Totalus is typically taught as a simple body bind curse, an immobilizing spell used in classrooms and, on at least one occasion, by 11-year-old children who really should not have been experimenting with paralysis magic. In its normal form, the spell locks the victim's limbs to their sides, freezes their posture, and leaves them upright but utterly unable to move. Harmless when used responsibly. Predictably fatal when used anywhere dangerous. The problem with full body paralysis isn't the spell, it's gravity. A wizard hit with Petrificus Totalus can't catch themselves, brace for impact, roll on landing, or even blink at the incoming ground. If the victim is standing near a staircase, cliff, balcony, broomstick, or frankly any elevated position, the result is a rigid, unconscious fall, followed by whatever hard surface they meet on their way down. This risk becomes far worse during wartime. In the Battle of Hogwarts, students, teachers, and Death Eaters were fighting across bridges, towers, and unstable rubble. A single body bind at the wrong moment could send someone tumbling off a battlement or collapsing under falling debris. Once paralyzed, a person can't dodge curses, protect their head, or perform even the most basic survival instinct, moving out of the way. That's why I prefer its lesser-known cousin, Petrificus Partialis, which allows one side of the body to flail around in terror as the inert side plummets towards certain death. Nah, I made that one up. But be honest, I had you going for a second, didn't I? Petrificus Totalus looks harmless in a classroom. In real combat, it becomes a spell where the floor, stairs, or nearest cliff edge chooses the method of execution. The slashing Hex Family. Not all dark spells come with dramatic incantations or green flashes. Some of the most brutal curses in the wizarding world are simply cutting and slashing hexes. Fast, silent, and horrifyingly effective in close quarters combat. While Sectumsempra is the most famous slashing spell, it's far from the only one. During the Battle of Hogwarts, both Death Eaters and Defenders cast multiple unnamed cutting jinxes designed to slice, tear, and incapacitate with frightening precision. By all accounts, some of these cutting jinxes could be almost as bad as a paper cut. Almost. These spells vary in strength. Some create shallow surface cuts that bleed quickly, forcing the victim to retreat or lose focus. Others dig deeper, carving through muscle or severing tendons. Unlike Sectumsempra, which produces large, devastating wounds, these smaller slashing hexes fire rapidly and can be cast one after another, creating a barrage of injuries that overwhelm an opponent before they can block or counter curse. One advantage of cutting jinxes is that they're extremely fast. They travel like thin ribbons of magical force, often invisible until they hit. Shield charms can stop them, but weaker shields crack or let some of the force through. In a large battle, especially one fought in tight corridors and high towers, an unexpected slashing hex can end a duel in seconds. The Death Eaters used these spells constantly, exploiting the chaos to wound opponents and disable fighters without relying on the more traceable Unforgivable Curses. Even Hogwarts Defenders used cutting spells when forced into combat. The books note flashes of red and purple light, classic indicators of slashing and piercing jinxes, darting across the castle during the battle. These hexes carry another danger. Magically inflicted cuts don't always heal like ordinary wounds. Some leave lingering effects, slow clotting, deeper tissue damage, or magical residue that must be removed before healing can begin. Individually, these slashing spells are fast and vicious. As a family, they turned parts of Hogwarts into a razor-sharp battlefield. Dark magic has a disturbing variety of ways to injure, break, control, or erase a wizard. But the spells themselves are only half the story. The real danger comes from the people who used them. The groups that operated in the shadows, wrote their own rules, and shaped the wizarding world far more than most witches and wizards ever realized. If you think forbidden spells are unsettling, wait until you see the secret societies that created them. Next up, all 17 secret organizations in the Harry Potter universe.